A tale of Ereignet and Ereignet. It rains and it enowned. So we have also, besides from Ereignis, we also have this Ereignet event and also an owning. So we'll try to think this in connection to this presentation, which I'll attach in the notes to on singularity and event in Heidegger by her name is something like Daniela Vallega-Neu or New or something, Neu. So one thing I thought, I mean, there's a lot of exact points worthy of Jesuit scholarship in the presentation, but I'll just focus on this large scale questions. One, so we're sort of thinking in the same as in the last presentation on the Lawrence Hemming question, Seiende. She's talking about here ein Seiendes, which she calls a being, as though being were a verb. But then superimposes. This is where it's too hard to state everything exactly without working it out for a long time. But basically superimposes the question of the grammatical middle voice. So the whom question wouldn't come in the middle voice, supposedly. I mean, all these things are inventions of the grammarians of different ages, most of whom came along even after the time of Plato and Aristotle. The pronouns. No, not the pronouns. The pronouns are very ancient, but and there's a contest between. I guess it's mostly prehistoric and pre-literate, as they could say. So that there's a contest about whether and when the pronouns arose, probably, and then they say in maybe 5000 BC or something, because they have some records of what they're calling the Proto-Indo-European or the Proto-Indo-Germanish languages. And then there's the contest of whether originally you had some language like Turkish is today, or just separate, where it only has one pronoun, and then you had one where you distinguish chiefly it from some pronoun that meant living things, without distinction to male, feminine. And then there's a question whether that one came first or whether some languages began with the three-part pronouns that are most common today, although just as I said, not in Turkish. So yeah, this grammatical question of the middle voice is really, yeah, we could see there, we get some leverage or some purchase on the problem of how the grammarians are philosophers. So I think that's the missing thing. That's what Derrida doesn't. He should have gone more directly into this question instead of sort of pussyfooting around it. But okay, were the grammarians simply philosophers. So and then this makes a lot of things much more clear when we see the grammarians who came out with the question of the actor and the acted upon, of the who and whom questions. This was a philosophic problem. And so in a way, this problem Heidegger is opening up here in this this question of what he's getting at with the Das Seiendes. I was trying to get to that question again, and still am, with the going into the history. Of course, we go into the history when we notice that language is already packed in, and sometimes they drop out. So I was saying sometimes the philosophers tried to fix the direction of courage and say you can't say a lion is courageous in the strict sense, but somehow that never really took. And I think for most native English speakers, the who and whom drops out largely. There's something about that's resisted by I don't know what to say, what's resisting it, but it's as though the singularity would always not want to crop up out of that, spring up. If there were sort of certain things that always sprung up, such as we sort of dimly suppose writing to be, or even though we know that, like, for instance, the alphabet we use is quite unusual, it nonetheless historically taken, it rose really just in one place, and then it took over. It seems to us like something that should always sort of arise out of the nothingness, or whatever, out of any sort of existence. Our alphabet, and then writing, and then that therefore we can also speak of the pre-literate people in order to say that it's more, there's a development is expected, a teleology is expected. So we call it, so when we do study that in sort of a humanist or anthropological perspective, we say these are the pre-literate people, and that's still in force. But think what happens when you drop that. That's difficult when the academic version has to be at the same time the version that is on official documents. Okay, but we're making some connections in this sort of within. Again, we're still in this inverted moment, this inverted dark theory moment. And what's the latest there? So Rubio came out with this sort of very fine speech, although rather generic, but very fine speeches must somehow be rather generic, otherwise they wouldn't be sort of recognized as being, as it were, following all the hope, following all the de rigueur standards and so on. Being in the orthodox good graces, or whatever, of the grammarians to some extent, of the great rhetors, of the Ciceros. So Rubio was lauded for the quality of his there's very, like, the Cicerone. It's even, it's very much like the tradition that Cicero has laid down in a way. But at the exact same time, this lady from The Economist said, now I really know the West is dead, or this is the last moment, the West is no more. By which she meant exactly this inverted dark moment, which was already registered like a long time ago by the big people, like by Robert Kagan and by Bolton heard about it, but he's just like totally refuses. He just keeps acting like, oh no, there's an anomaly, it will reset. But all the big people here that are actually sort of involved in it, Newland, whatever, chimed in. There's big articles in the main outlets and so on. I mean the main insider outlets, Atlantic Council and people like that. Yes, so it doesn't make a difference if we could have another. Look how quickly we go into this technique business. We try to make what we learn, we want to make it into a technique instead of. But okay, let's. Like, what could we do with this Heideggerian? What could the military do with this Heideggerian type of way of analyzing things as going to the middle? How does it called? The middle tense. Is that what it said? By dropping the usual questions of actor and acted upon. But okay, in this, what's the problem with this thinking the singular for Heidegger? It's because usually we think by way of identity, and therefore by saying, like somebody I saw yesterday, that's the same person. We think in terms of identity. We sort of update and compare. But if there's no material for the updating or comparison, then this is what's hinted at in the concept of the singular. So partly the concept of the singular, it's like other very enigmatic but persistent notions like infinity, which is like kind of can think you understand what infinity says, because it's kind of like, oh, it goes on forever. But then if you think about it at all, it sort of doesn't make, like, how could I think of something that goes on forever? You couldn't really catch up or whatever, or there's not even a godlike view of it. It doesn't make sense. It's not like, for instance, you could draw it on a two-dimensional piece of paper that'd be outside the dimension, and then therefore depict it to yourself in some mysterious way, even though the thing you're depicting isn't quite the actual thing. Something like what they do in physics. You can't even do that with infinity if you take it properly. And the same thing with the notion of the singular. You can't really think the singular, and yet somehow dimly we think that we can think the difference in singular and the things that are being repeated and compared. Like the example I just gave, you see somebody and then you see them the next day and you're updating, comparing, same person, different day. If you're deprived of that particular compared to another particular, and then the suggestion of a category, then you're sort of don't know how to represent what you're doing to yourself. So I think this is a temptation to technologize Heidegger in this sense, and make Heidegger into another. This is what he's saying about falling back into the ontic, partially. Because you want to turn him into another philosophy, into another Aristotle, into another presentation of principles. And so it's just as, many problems in Nietzsche is sort of, is sort of constantly, contemptuously aware of this moment. And in this life saying lie, and in this, but it's sort of like with Nietzsche saying, yes, he's noticing this constantly, but it's like, what's the alternative? It's thought is supposed to just become like that Italian etymologist, and Nietzsche, like that, wrote some of those sort of cruel fables, and just be in some kind of divine somberness and just recline forever, as it were, with lotus eaters. And Nietzsche is sort of like, that he wants to sort of keep trying. So I think, Heidegger is aware. Heidegger and his singularity, I'll leave it that way, is he sort of pushes towards a point where he's aware of these two temptations of the sort of letting be as a lotus eater's fate. And Odysseus is also linked up to Socrates as Sophos says, they mean us no harm, but we cannot stay here. And so I guess another and maybe more direct in a way of stating that would be, it's sort of something like a Taoist state, and a state where even if you do wrong, you still avoid the consequences. That's sort of the Taoist state. Heidegger is aware of this sort of a letting go possibility, or a sort of this Nietzschean sort of try-hard possibility. And then, he's not really tempted towards either of them, but he's definitely thinks it's sort of a Jesuit's duty to put these down as like the forces that are close in power, right around the attempt to cage up and bring into our Dasein the singularity as the way he's trying to think it in this Ereignis, Ereignet, Seiendes problem.